Greetings, everyone. I'm Mar, and once again, this is my opinion. So far, since I've been doing these Everybody Loves Raymond episode by episode reviews, there hasn't been a lot of episodes that I 100% skip. So far, before this, the only one that was on that list was Fascinating Debra. And going back and watching it, I was pleasantly surprised by how much I enjoyed it this time around. Other ones that I occasionally skip going through them, I'm like, yeah, it depends on my mood. And in the next couple seasons, there are going to be some more episodes like that, and even further on into 5 and 6, like the one about the parents with the horrible kid always comes to mind. Other than Marie stinks, that always makes me laugh. But for season 2, this was the one episode I was dreading getting to because this episode just is always other. Despite the fact there are some fun moments, is never clicked with me that well. Now, I will say this time around, I did enjoy it a little bit more than I remember the last time I watched it, which was, ooh, I can't even remember when the last time I watched this episode was. At least 5 plus years ago, if not 10 plus years ago. But it is episode 20, T-Ball. Now, this episode, as the title gives away, revolves around Allie beginning to play T-ball, which is a simpler version of baseball. If you know the rules of baseball, it's more about learning the game, learning the skills. You hit it off the tee instead of having someone pitch it to you. And at least based on how it's presented in this episode, you don't keep score and nobody wins or loses, which to a point I kind of get. But I think that also takes away from the fun and enjoyment of the sport. Because I remember at Allie's age, I was playing soccer and we still had winners and losers. Maybe it's just how T-ball is different from baseball. I don't know, I never played either outside of PE class. But it just seems to me that you could still teach kids the basics of it while also having a winner or loser and teaching kids to learn to lose gracefully. Well, every week each parent has to bring a healthy snack. And this week it was Ray and Debra's turn to bring the snack. Debra brings Hawaiian punch and pretzels. Not the healthiest of snacks, I will concede, but for a game it is a decent snack. And Brian, who he's not really described as the coach, but he's the guy with the clipboard, seems to be one of the parents really involved with setting up the T-ball, and seems to have been the self-proclaimed T-ball head. And he really gets on Debra's case about the pretzels, to the point where you just want to smack him. He's the type of parent that if this guy started talking to you like this, you'd be like, excuse me? Who the hell do you think you are? I mean, I'm normally reserved and nice to people, but if this guy started talking to me like this, I'd be like, excuse me? Brian, come over this way. Just who are you to talk to me like this? Now, Debra's snack is technically not on the approved list, but with just how anal retentive Brian gets about it, it's like, dude, does it matter? So what? It's not on there. We find out more stuff. There's some fruits on there. There's string cheese on there. That's a good one. That's probably what I would have brought. But the other ones like carrot sticks and all that. What kid wants to eat that at a sports practice? I mean, I like carrots, but I know I wouldn't want to eat carrot sticks at a sports practice. Maybe apples, bananas, but carrot sticks, no. And of course, Brian's wife does bring in another snack to try to replace the pretzels. Debra starts getting annoyed with Brian's passive aggressiveness, and like usual, Ray is not helping her, which this and Brian, where this whole thing with Ray and Brian, is the main reason I was dreading this episode, because I remember not liking some of this dynamic. And I'm going to bring in a wrestling term here describing the character of Brian. I'll say he's well acted. This is a little cameo appearance. I'm looking up the name just so I can remember the pronunciation correctly. It's Dan Castellaneta, which if that name does not ring a bell to you, I'm going to say another famous line he is known for. Don't! Yep, it's the voice of Homer Simpson himself, which I did not know that until I was actually looking it up. I was like, wow, I didn't know Homer was in this. And he's also in another episode in season 4, if I remember right. He's annoying in that episode too, both from a writing and from an acting standpoint, but he's more tolerable there, other than the fact he interrupts Ray, which that would have been like, nope, we're done. But here, to bring in a wrestling phrase, the character of Brian has heat with me. For those of you who don't know, heat is a term that's mainly used in wrestling, but like with other phrases, I like to cross-reference them. It means that essentially the antagonist, bad guy, whatever one of phrase you click in there, generates a welling of emotions within you that you want to see them get their comeuppance. Like, compare other things to it. We want to see Luke overcome the Empire. We want to see Stone Cold Steve Austin overcome Vince McMahon and the corporation. In a setting like this, we'd want to see our protagonists in a sitcom situation overcome whatever petty grievances this character has. However, in this case, Brian does not just have heat with me. He has go away heat with me, which many people for years have called X-Pac heat, but I prefer to just use go away heat. That it's not just you want to see him get their comeuppance, you want to see him get a comeuppance and get him off my TV screen. And that's part of the reason I haven't watched this episode a lot. It's just the moment I see Brian, I'm like, yep, out. He's more tolerable in the later episode, but with this one, it's like... And I know, like I mentioned, that they said before, that if they're without the drama, there's no comedy, no friction, no comedy. Lock the door and all that, but it's like, this is a situation that's like, I get where they're going for, but it's like, it's just... And I'm not taking anything away from Dan. He does play his part well, and I think that's part of the reason I do get go home heat, is because Dan plays the character beautifully. It's just, with how the episode's written around him, it's like, I just don't care. Although there is one thing that pleasantly surprised me near the end of the episode, which I will get to, which the latter part of the episode is because of Brian and his wife sweeping in to take care of the snack. They are going to say Debra and Ray have to do it next week. Debra, of course, is doing the rightful thing. Like, I'm not going to bring a snack next week. I brought one. You pulled the power play, were rude to me in doing this, so nope, I'm not bringing a snack. And Ray, being his usual self, having to be liked by everyone, which he tries to deny it, but it's true. He does try to be liked by everyone. He decides he's going to bring a snack on the download. He's going to bring everything on the list. Of course, the first person he tells are Frank and Robert, who rightfully are like, nah. And the whole time they're watching the thing unfold on the end, they're actually talking to each other. It's like sports calls, which is see how it worked for them. Like, that part got a chuckle out of me. That's one part. I forgot about that before I watched it. Watching them, like, okay, that's one part that did kind of save the episode the few times I did watch it, but not enough for me to give the episode a full pass. Ray trying to be clandestine with it, showing it to Brian. Brian, of course, when Debra walks back, has to be his usual annoying self, and this is the other part of Brian's character in this episode that he gives me go away heat with me, and that is that he has to constantly bring it up. It's hard to tell whether he's doing this accidentally because of a little miscommunication, because of Ray trying to be sly, or he's doing it intentionally to try and get another rise out of Debra. I leaned him a little bit more towards that because of how he was in the earlier parts of the episode, where he's just a total putz, the type you want to smack upside the head. But it leads to the point where Ray explodes, and this is a moment where you watch it and you're like, alright, he's Frank's son, you can stop those tests. And it's one thing like, wow, Ray, you finally stand up for yourself and you stand up for your wife. Good. Good there. And of course, they no longer have to do the snacks. Now, it looks like the episode's going to end on a thing where Ray's like, yeah, he doesn't have to be liked by everyone. Then it ends on another scene where Ray's out with the twins, and it's his turn to provide the snack. And who does he get to cater? Maureen. She brings in a bunch of pasta and all that. And it's like, so for T-Ball, they're going to get on everybody for healthy snacks, but here they don't care about the pasta. Although pasta can be healthy, depending on how you cook it. Just one of those weird things where it's like, I guess the type of snack you can bring is situational. The running gag of Frank bringing up Korea continues in this episode. I did remember this gag, but I forgot it was from this episode, where he brings up that Brian reminds him of some people he used to deal with when he was in the service, and that was second lieutenants. Butterbars, as some will call them. Now, even if you haven't been in the military, most people would be familiar with the negative connotation that young officers usually have, especially if they enlist straight out of college. As they seem, the stereotype about them is that they know everything by the book. They throw their rank around. In fact, there actually is a video on YouTube that I think you should look up. It's called Things Second Lieutenants Say. I think my favorite part of it is when he says to an NCO, "Don't confuse your experience with my rank." That sums up the stereotype about second lieutenants perfectly. And my supervisor, who was in the Corps for 20 years, hasn't really mentioned much about officers he dealt with that were like this, but I remember in JROTC, the sergeant, he did mention that he had to have a talk with some lieutenants from occasion. I'm going to assume that they were second lieutenants, but it could have been first that hasn't learned yet. I'm going to guess by the time you probably get promoted to captain, you probably know more. That is, if you started as an officer straight out of it. I think if you promote up from NCO, you probably are not going to be as overbearing and Brian-like. But anyway, the gag is that Frank mentions, this little setup, is that the way that they dealt with them was friendly fire. And believe me, it wasn't so friendly. And I just love how Ray jumps on this. It's like, so you're telling me to shoot Brian? Yes. Insert the Jack Nicholson head nod from The Departed here. Of course, then it'd be a totally different episode. That'd be like the Robot Chicken version of this episode where Ray pulls a gun out of the bag and shoots Brian. And then Brian reverts to his Homer Simpson voice. Which, of course, speaking of Homer, that's one thing that you really want to do to Brian. Why, you little... All in all, this episode is just there. It's alright. I mean, the main whole thing with Brian, like I said, has go-away heat with me. It's one of those ones that, like, I see what they're going for. The acting's fine. It's just, it doesn't fully invest me. I'm more fascinated by the side stuff, the side gags around, Frank and Robert doing a little side thing, the little running gag throughout the episode of Michael always stripping naked. The gag at the end with the food, of course, the gag I just mentioned about the lieutenants. All that stuff around it I find funnier. And of course the beginning when Ray gets home and he starts singing a T-Ball version of the Take Me Out to the Ball Game song. And of course he brings up the whole him and Debra's romantic life at the end. We don't have as much sex as we should. Before it goes into the credits. There's not really much else to say about the episode. Definitely one that's going to get a hard skip from me for future viewings unless I want to just see that one gag, in which case I could probably just find that online if I just want to watch it randomly. That is the end of Disc 4, so we are now in the home stretch of Season 2. And the fun thing I will say is that we go from an episode that is auto-skip to a handful of episodes that I would watch anytime. And even though the last two is a two-parter, it's going to be one review when we get there, so don't think I'm going to split it up. It's just going to be one massive review, so it'll probably be about the same length as my review of the pilot, depending on how much stuff I got to talk about with it. But the next episode, oh boy. Robert, we get to see him do some more police stuff outside of his normal uniform, and he gets to do some roasting. It, of course, is traffic school.